Random Thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in Eastern Africa, or First Step in East Africa, an exploration of Harar. And in this part, he describes the political organization of the Issa subclan of the Somali people as being Republican. But were they really Republican? So we are going to look at that. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a while, and I need to point out that this book was published in 1850, so the Somali political organization during that time might not be the same as to what it is today. So we need to bear that in mind. And of course, a few things might, or we can say that some things have not changed, but a lot has changed. Of course, there was no Somalia as a country, and there was no Ethiopia as a country, and there was no Kenya as a country, there was no Djibouti. These are very recent creations, so we need to bear that in mind. But going back to the topic of the Issa subclan or clan being Republican. Now, if you've watched my videos for a long time, you understand my position about African republics. And I've said that I don't like the fact that enough is not said about the African republics, even though in Africa, there were more republics than there were monarchies. And I know I ran into problems when I say that. Some people are like, what do you mean republics? Some people are like, monarchies were more than republics. But I've always said that the reason why we know so much about African monarchies than we know about African republics is because the Europeans who colonized Africa at some point took control of telling the history of Africa. And the Europeans of 19th century, even mid 20th century, going back, were monarchists. They were like maybe 90% monarchists. That means that most of Europe was under monarchies or under monarchs. So to them, monarchy seemed to be the most advanced form of government, and they praised it. They thought of it as the best thing. So when they come to Africa and they find republics, they don't want to recognize them. But here is a very interesting fact. The Europeans, even when they were 90% under monarchies, they recognized that a republic was an advanced form of political organization. That's why the Roman Republic has always been celebrated, the ancient Roman Republic, for thousands of years. It has been celebrated in Europe as this very, very highly politically advanced society. So yeah, even though they were mostly or they came from monarchies, they did see the value of republics. But when they come to Africa, of course, there is seeing Africans a certain way. So trying to talk of African republics was like maybe trying to acknowledge that they were capable of organizing themselves in very complex political structures, and they could not do that. So yeah, so you saw, and I've run into problems by saying that republics are better political organizations, and some people don't like when I say that, especially people who are very much into or are monarchists, we can say. Now, when we come to the Horn of Africa, of course, we have a few monarchies that have existed. Of course, the Abyssinian monarchy, the Axum, the old Axum, and others. And I can put in there the sultanates. The sultanates are basically monarchs or monarchies in their political organization. But here is something we need to be very careful about. When it comes to these political organizations, whether it's a republic, it's a monarchy, it's a democracy, it's very hard to find one that is pure. That is very hard to find a pure democracy, very hard to find a pure republic, very hard to find a pure monarch. You will find a monarch that has some elements of republics and some elements of democracy. You will find a republic that has some elements of democracy and some elements of monarchy. And then you will have some republics that have elements of democracy and they have elements of monarchy. Yeah, so when, for example, we talk of the sultanates, while we can say they were monarchs, they will have elements of republics in them. And sometimes even some elements of democracy. Not so much, but you get. When we talk of the Abyssinian monarchies, they will have elements of republics in them and maybe some small amount of democracy. So there is that. We need to bear in mind that when we say a republic, it's very hard to find a pure republic. It's very hard to find a pure democracy. It's very hard to find a pure monarchy, especially in these days and especially today. Now, Richard Burton does say something about the Issa people. This is a clan or a subclan of the Somali people. And he describes them, he gives us very detailed description of who they were and how they organize themselves. This is what he says. The Issa, probably the most powerful branch of the Somali nation, extends northwards to the Weimar family of the Dankali, southern to the Gudabirsi, and midway between Zeila and Berbera. Eastward, it is bounded by the sea, westward by the Galas around Harar. It derives itself from Dir and Hayadur without, however, knowing aught beyond the ancestral names. It is tweeted with paganism by its enemies. So its enemies accuse them of having pagan origins. And I've said these are arguments we shouldn't focus so much on because we never know. Or they can be reports that he got. These can be reports that he got that are not based on factual or any facts. He continues, this tribe say to number 100,000 shields. I don't know what that means. Does it mean soldiers? Is divided into numerous clans. This again split up into minor septs, which plunder and sometimes murder one another in time of peace. A fierce and turbulent race of Republicans, the Issa owe nominal allegiance to Ugas or chief residing in the Hadagali Hills. So he calls them Republicans, but at the same time he says they have this allegiance to Ugas or a chief residing in Hadagali. But there is a reason why he calls them Republicans, and we are going to get to that. He is generally called Robley, Prince Rainy, the name or rather title being one of the good omen for drought here, like Adina in Europe, justifies the change of a dynasty. Every kraal has its Odei, sheikh or headman, after whose name the settlement is Sind and other pastoral lands is called. He is obeyed only when his orders suit the taste of King Demos. So which is a monarch? He is always superior to his fellows in wealth and cattle, sometimes in talent and eloquence and deliberation. He is assisted by the whale, or Akil. Now, this is where the element of republic comes in. The Pitso Council of Southern Africa, he compares them to Pitso Council. These are elders obeyed on account of their age. This is a senate. So the Issa seems like the Issa had a senate called the Wail or Akil, who made decisions. Now, I don't know whether there was a larger senate or it was smaller senates, but a sector, of course, but they used to have these senates, and that's why he calls them Republicans. But he calls them that because he came from a monarchy, and at that time UK was closer to pure monarchy. So the issue of having senators, I think, was kind of like foreign to him. So yeah, so that is why he calls the Issa Republicans, is because they had that element of Council of Elders. I call them senators, and to him that qualified them to be a republic, even though they seem to basically have a structure of a monarch. I don't think they were Republicans. They were monarchy, but with Republican bits. Those are my random thoughts.